We back. Okay, we're looking at Prototype Pantheon. I believe it is called. The potentially third boss of the raid, depending on which route you go. This is the boss that we killed third, though I would actually probably advise your raid team to try and go for Celest and maybe Zymox as well, because I think both those bosses are easier than Pantheon here. Pantheon's quite hectic, but let's take a look at this. So this is, of course, is from a feral POV. In this fight, you're playing full single target talents. The only thing you would change is you would play Primal Wrath if you prefer. I don't think it's worth playing Predator at all, so don't do that. It is an AoE fight, though, in the sense that you can run Primal Wrath, especially because of the last third of the fight. So the way this fight works is you have 4 bosses that you're trying to kill in unison. You have Duty and War first, and then you have Renewal and Absolution second. When these 2 bosses, when either of them gets to 50%, you phase and you fight the other 2 bosses. When those 2 bosses get to 50%, one of them, you then phases, and you then have to fight all 4 bosses at the same time. So that's like the gist of the fight. Now this fight is super hectic. I basically more or less was using Berserk on cooldown. Now we ended up lusting when all 4 bosses come down, and I don't think we did it as soon as they come down, but quite quickly after they do come down, we end up lusting. I use a Berserk on cooldown so that I get a 3rd Berserk in this fight, or a 4th Berserk. I basically get an additional Berserk rather than holding my Berserk to make sure it lines up with Bloodlust, which I don't really care too much about. So I pot and I just Berserk on cooldown, or I pot on pull, Berserk on pull, and then I just use Berserk as and when it's up. So the way I do my opener is actually quite interesting. So what I thought with these bosses, because they're gonna stack up, I actually delay my thrash. So what I do is I rake. Now I get parried on this fight, of course. That's something actually to be wary of, is that these bosses do parry, so get fucked, I guess. But parry's my first rake, so I re-rake, I then shred, and then I wait until they're stacked, and then I thrash. And you have enough time. I use Tiger Dash here to kind of bridge the gap and get between these 2 bosses as they're getting grouped up. Basically, rake, shred, then thrash, then I Tiger Fury, then I Primal Wrath, then Berserk, then I rake the mob that isn't raked, so War, then I Convoke. So by doing that, I delay my thrash so that I only have to use 1 thrash. However, I still generate my Blood Talons pre-Berserk. I then Tiger Fury to make sure that my rips are snapshotted with Blood Talons and Tiger Fury. And then I'm in my Berserk window. I use my rake on War, which means I have a Berserked rake, which will do more damage because it's as if from stealth. And then I Convoke. My Convoke window is still within my Tiger Fury window, so I'm not refreshing a Tiger Fury there, which is good. More bites. It means both my rips are snapped, and both mobs have a Berserk stealth rake. And you just full on send it. That's what I feel is a good opener. There might be a better opener, but that's what I felt comfortable with initially getting into this fight week 1. Apart from that, you're basically just going through the motions of trying to maintain rake and rip on both of these mobs as best as you can. Because you're playing because you have 2 mobs, and because you're playing Primal Wrath, I think it's very difficult to maintain Tiger Fury rip on 2 mobs. I don't think you actually can. So I'm just going through the flow of when I have Tiger Fury, I'm applying it my Primal Wrath, and when I don't, I'm just applying Primal Wrath anyway, and it's unfortunate. But you don't have to only do Primal Wrath. You can still look to bite during these windows. So it will normally be 1 Primal, 1 bite, 1 Primal, 1 bite. You might be able to fit multiple bites in, like an extra bite, depending on your haste, depending on your crits, depending on just the specific timings on your Primal Wraths. But you're basically juggling. Try and always bite the rip that's the lowest, so that way they're somewhat even. And yeah, use Convoke to your advantage. Try and Convoke on like on cooldown, so that then you're always having it available, and you're always like lining it up with Berserk, and then also you're trying to maintain those Primal Wraths as much as you can on both targets, and then just look to make sure that you're multi-raking. So on this mob, so we phase the mobs at 50%. On this mob now, we start with Renewal, so look to interrupt, of course. But I apply a rip on this mob. Now, I actually misplay here on this kill. So my Convoke is at 33 seconds right now. If I don't Tiger Fury in 3 seconds, then I can't Tiger's Fury until my Convoke comes back up anyway. So I basically will lose a whole Tiger Fury. So I should Tiger Fury now, because otherwise I lose one anyway. That way, Tiger Fury lines up with Convoke. So make sure you're ready to Tiger Fury there. I then single target rip this mob. I pre-generated Blood Talons when the previous 2 mobs died. That way I have Blood Talons, I have 5 combo points, I can Tiger Fury, insta-rip this mob, and then I can rake it. I don't, or I shouldn't in theory, be thrashing yet. I want to wait for us to bring Absolution in, then I can look to thrash, because then I only have to use it once rather than having to apply it twice. When Absolution comes in, depending on the timing of your rip on Renewal, you can decide to either single target rip Absolution or Primal Wrath. If the rip on Renewal is, say, like above 20 seconds, I wouldn't bother Primal Wrathing. I would just rip both of them independently and then resync the Primal Wrath eventually when they, you know, resync up again. But I ended up Primal Wrathing here, which is a minor misplay, but that's okay. Now, during this phase, whilst you're doing the same rhythm that you were doing on the previous 2 bosses, you want to make sure that you are interrupting Renewal as often as you can. You might have an interrupt rotation with your guild, which is cool, but you want to be dodging these like froggies, these creatures that are running on the sides of the room here, or on these like these lines in the room. You also want to dodge this massive whirlwind, tornado, cyclone, hurricane thing. That will silence you, which is actually really awkward. It's really annoying. And then also these bosses parry, so you have to constantly be moving back and forth, and they parry, and you got to dodge this storm. And then also Absolution does a frontal, so be very careful of Absolution's frontal. He doesn't do it very regularly. He's doing it right now. There's a racking pain. Boom. Quite an easy dodge, but just be aware of it. So Berserk is coming up for me in a couple seconds. I'm gonna hold it a little bit because we've got Convoke still on cooldown for 10 more seconds after Berserk is up. Now this is a major mechanic that you want to look out for here. So Absolution is gonna grip everyone in with this Hand of Destruction, and then you want to immediately spread and make room. One thing you want to be careful of is before you spread, make sure both mobs have Rake on them and Primal Wrath is or rips are as long duration as possible. So try and apply a Primal Wrath as you're running away. You can see here, I think I'm cheeky. Yeah, I apply a Rake, and then I apply Primal Wrath, and now I leave. So I'm very cheeky with that. But then you get to a space, you spread these. Like, this is basically going to be like the Prideful mob for Mythic Plus in Season 1 of this expansion. Everyone's going to get hit with this, or everyone's going to be affected by this Hand of Destruction or Sinful Projection. A few people, not everyone, but a lot of people. And then it's going to explode and shoot out north, south, east, west. And you just want to make sure to dodge all of these. You can see I'm absolutely sick, ducking, diving, weaving, dodging. And then we get back onto the boss, and I immediately Berserk. I have to, right? Because Berserk's coming up, Convoke is coming up shortly, but I gotta Berserk now to get it running so that we have Berserk back up for the boss. Otherwise, the boss will die before we get our 3rd Convoke. So I Berserk, insta Convoke, just send it. A bad Convoke Berserk is better than losing a whole one entirely. So just going through the flow again, shred biting during our Berserk, trying to apply both or increase the length of both of these rips here. And then in the last phase, so depending on your guild and how quickly you kill this boss, I think week 1 is the only time you can really get 3 Berserks. I think if you go into week 2, when people have more gear, this is going to only be a 2 Convoke boss. Because you're bloodlusting soon, right? So you're bloodlusting in a sec. All the bosses now are at 50%. We're going to be bloodlusting soon. I only get a 3rd Berserk by the skin of my pants, skin of my teeth, by the flight of my pants. I barely get a third Berserk. So just be mindful of that. If your kill times are quicker, if you have like a 2% wipe and you can clearly see that you're not getting Berserk back up for another 20 seconds, then don't use that second Berserk and save it for Bloodlust because it makes more sense. It's better to get, if you can get 2 Berserks and one of them is in Bloodlust, or you can get 3 Berserks and none of them are in Bloodlust, it's better to get 3 Berserks with the Convoke, right? So just be doing that. But yeah, basically during this phase, when we have all 4, I'm making sure I'm multi-raking. A top tip as well, if you're going to Convoke, make sure at least 3 of the mobs have rake on them before you send it with the Convoke. That way, all the mobs are raked, so Convoke will not reapply rakes. It will try and fish for shreds and bites instead. So try and multi-dot with rake. That will ensure that your Convokes are stronger, more powerful, more gutting. Big. But that's most of it really. Look to be interrupting still, dodging these tornadoes. These bosses are doing all the mechanics, so just be dodging and ducking and diving. You can see I'm desperately trying just to make sure that everything maintains rake on them. Trying to make sure that everything's got rip still ticking. Swiping, obviously. So even when it's only 2 bosses, you want to be swiping, not shredding. Swipe does more damage on 2 targets. I have 50% crit as well, which is really high and pretty much guarantees on swipe that I'm going to be getting 2 combo points, which is juicy. But this is when shit starts to get really hectic. So you can see Berserk's coming up in 24 seconds. I'm getting hit here from these blue little mobbies, which is very awkward. But I got Convoke coming up in 25 seconds. So you can clearly see, like, this is almost not a third Berserk fight. You can see this is so close to not being a third Berserk fight. If your guild is a little bit quicker in damage, you do not get an additional one. But my Berserk comes up now. I have to send it. Convoke's not coming up for another 8 seconds. Doesn't matter. These bosses are going to be dying, and I've just got to send it. Gets really chaotic. Gets really hectic. That's okay. Just try and keep you cool. Try and keep calm. Just play it out. That's it. That's the boss. Done. That's a long video. Hopefully this was really helpful. Those are a lot of the thought processes that I'm going through when I'm fighting this boss. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. See you in the next one. Good luck with this one.